Hello and welcome into the Sorare Data Show. I'm Andrew Laird. You can find me as Lairdinho on Sorare. Joined today, as usual on a Tuesday, by Harry Trades. And today, special guest, we have Chris Stone, who some of you in the chat may recognize because Chris is a viewer of the show and was quite passionate about Friday's show, which, Chris, I want to say, firstly, my apologies for missing your comments. I went back and still can't see them. So I want to at least not take full responsibility for ignoring them. However, you then sent a few Twitter messages this week or this weekend that kind of explained where you were. And I was like, look, this is really good. We should just talk about this in front of everybody. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's an overused expression, but like I said, long-time listener, first-time caller. And yeah, it was a 29 tweet thread, which I think is a record for me, just to go through everything. But like I said, for me, I really appreciate the content that you produce. And for me, it's just something I wanted to engage in a discourse. And I'm just not willing to pay Elon Musk £8 a month to tweet longer than 280 characters at any given time. So yeah, I was just really happy to jump on.
So I know this, there's no way this can be the case, but I've convinced myself that you wrote the first one and you were like, I've got 28 more, so I'm just going to write one of 29. And then when you got to the 29th, you were just like, all right, I'm done.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I've used ChatGPT a lot of my life. So I actually sort of wrote it out and I was like, ChatGPT, can you just divide this into 29 tweets that will separate itself out? And, you know, that's why you get some tweets that are slightly different lengths, but it kind of pick and chose where it thought it would be best to do it. So yeah, I'm all about working smarter, not harder, which is also a selfless promotion to Sorare Data about it's a great resource to use. So like, don't work so hard on your Sorare lineup, just do it on Sorare Data.
Let's go, man. Chris is just earning the invites back. Thank you to everybody for coming in. I see Nepenthes is here claiming first, but then I also see ECS saying, trying to watch Nep's new Sorare video when we came live. Decisions. I mean, obviously, RIP, Nep didn't make it. Anyon said, first in, it was Anyon, Sorare Soul, and Bob Franklin. Of course, Bob was here. Anyon said, finished third in Prem in-season Division 3 and also a podium here. Hopefully my elite box from Rivals gives me more than a tier 4 this time to make it an almost perfect game week. Harry, I assume you prefer Essence over tier 5.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement on that.
Essence over tier 4?
Yeah, give me the gamble.
Tier 3?
Oh.
Which
nah,
competition?
I think we stopped there.
That's a good question, Chris.
Yeah. That's a great point. Is it? Yeah, tier 3 from Champ isn't a tier 3 from Contender, and that's just where we're at right now. But I think I'd stop at tier 3, across the mark. Actually, that's where my gambling degen nature goes.
That's where it's at. That's right. Sorare said, my old boss had a catchphrase, perception is reality. That phrase still makes me shudder. Long story short, he went from CEO to unemployed. Hopefully that's not the case for everyone here. Anyway, Kev Hurd, afternoon. I think more importantly, the reality is not everyone's perception, which is kind of an interesting point there. Pinta said, a box with that many chances to give you a level up cannot be considered a reward. Only high level boxes truly are. Plus, don't forget that a year ago, there weren't DNPs in the pools, so there were better tiers. The fact that the rewards are worse and less frequent is not perception. Were DNP rewards only a year ago?
Feels like
years.
Yeah.
Anyway, Charlie, what's up? Sorare Jujo, as a psychology student, I cannot confirm the statement that is made in the title of the show. Okay. Toby says perception is a reality check. Dirk is reminding everybody to hit the like button, which, would appreciate. Anthony finally catching one live, so thank you for coming in. Olaf, do you guys see Olaf here? How else could you pronounce this? Is it Welsh? Harry, help me out here.
No, we don't have any UGHs in Welsh.
Okay. Anyway. ZM Star with a low blow here. My perception is that legends are about to speak. My reality is just dudes talking about a fantasy sports game. Maybe both sides are true. John Andrews going to catch up in an hour. Mike Baston, what's up? And let's see. Nixon, good evening. Tom, Quinny in the house. Love it. Guidemeister, Hoodwink, Henry. Oh, we got some, speaking of legends in the house. Anyway, KB said, I guess this is about people not acknowledging that essence and boxes as the rewards that they are. It creates the reality that people feel like they are not rewarded resulting into the reality that there is probably more to that message. Here we go. A huge problem. Really doesn't matter how good the boxes actually are if people don't see them as worthy, which, yeah, that's the perception we'll get into. Anyway, Arthur, Peter, Stefan, Red or Dead. Toby said Essence over bottom half tier 3s. Peter said a tier 2 from Contender is a tier 5. Man, the truth hurts sometimes. Anyway, thank you to everybody for coming in. So, Chris, do you want to kind of highlight what you were trying to add during Friday's stream, and then what you did on Twitter to kind of like get us into it today?
Sure. Basically, for me, when I've been following this for a couple weeks now, it seems like people have been complaining about the state of Classic. And one of the things I sort of called out as an observation of you, Laird, is that it felt like you were doing a really good job of being objective, which was sort of the reality of the situation, talking about the actual gameplay of Classic hasn't changed. If anything, the rewards have actually improved in terms of the amount of people receiving rewards. But what I sort of came back to you is even though those things might be true, and some of the other things you talked about in terms of the reason Classic is more difficult is because every year there's more and more star players available to people at cheaper prices, driving up scores. And that even though all the stuff that you were saying I perceived as being true, that doesn't mean that was how other people saw it. And my sort of complaint, however you want to frame it, was sort of, yeah, Laird, I think you're speaking the truth. But if people don't perceive it as the truth, that's a problem. And for me, what I was sort of viewing Sorare as, even when you look at things like tweets from Nicholas and stuff like that, it's talking about sales, which is largely to in-season cards. And when they talk about there's $15 million in the prize, that's talking about the in-season. There's just not a lot of communication talking about Classic. And even though all the things you say are true, Classic cards can win new cards that you can then win to play, or win to play to win money, or win Essence to get new cards to win money. If people don't believe that's the case, that's a problem. And I think for me, that was the point I hadn't necessarily, I felt like was a perspective that was being covered from your side because you were doing such a great job of being really objective. I just feel that the perception based on my Twitter thread or even in the comments of the video on Friday is people aren't necessarily willing to understand the facts. And if they don't understand the facts, Sorare does have to take a degree of responsibility that they can't just dismiss people even if they think those people are inaccurate in their beliefs.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, that maybe it's kind of my own response to people who are kind of reflecting that perception of no, things are worse, and it just kind of snowballs from there, and telling them like, no, it's not, doesn't help. And I think what's tricky about this is that for a long time, perception on about Sorare came down to, man, this sounds arrogant, came down to content creators. That the way that we talked about Sorare, I think, kind of reflected a lot of the community. And there are fewer content creators now than there were like 2 years ago, when everybody could just buy a card and sell it for double. And everyone's like, oh, let me do a video about this. Yeah. And what's kind of weird is I'm not sure where the responsibility falls. And it shouldn't be like a responsibility for third-party people like Sorare managers to convince others that everything is good. But like, what can Sorare do to say to its users, like, no, these boxes are important and they're valuable and you can win them in Classic, and you should be happy about this?
That's the tough part, right? And I think the analogy I used in my Twitter thread was like, if you're a restaurant and people perceive your menu as being too expensive, you either have to prove to the people that it's worth the price to pay, or you have to reduce the cost to then meet with their perception of what your value is for the cost of your meal. And I agree. Like, I don't think it's necessarily inherently on yourself or people like Quinny or anyone out there that's a content creator. I do believe that falls on Sorare. And to be honest, like, it's a difficult question, right? Like, I'm not saying that it's a simple answer that, it's just, if I did, I would just go to Sorare and I get a full-time job and I just work at Sorare and tell them how to do their marketing. But even just simple things in terms of just not every message always being around in season. I thought a really interesting suggestion that was on a previous episode was like the Zidane experience. At the moment, Legends, I guess you could put them in the Classic category, they're basically dead. And I think the suggestion was, if you want the Zidane experience, you've got to own one of those cards. You could still blend that in with, you still need to have 4 in-season cards, but you need to have one of those. Like, it just, I know it's not a straightforward answer, but it just feels like the amount of communications coming from the corporate side, it's very heavy on in season and just a little bit of love. And I think I mentioned it in my Twitter thread. I don't think it means you give them more money or more prizes, because that's not sustainable from a business model, but at least provide a little bit of perceived excitement for Classic. It just feels like the comms are very one-sided at the moment.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. Mike said perception versus reality is something we've always said about Sorare and how they think the game should be played and how we do. And the same is happening with boxes. Like, Harry, do you think that enough people think, like, I can't tell if people are saying boxes aren't rewards because they don't think what's in the boxes is valuable enough, or is it just that, like, because it's not a card, it doesn't feel like a reward?
Yeah, I think people are kind of split on that for the most part, because yeah, if you've been around for a little while and you were pre-boxes, then you are probably going to be in the camp of, well, these aren't cards, so they might be in that camp. Whereas if you're a little bit newer and then you're just kind of hearing about, like, oh, they used to have cards here, but like now it's boxes, then that's maybe a little bit different because they haven't experienced it themselves. I was doing a stream yesterday and somebody mentioned in the chat, and I don't know how accurate this number is, and I'm sure Peter can pull me up on it. I know he's done some amazing work with his dashboard and stuff, and I've had a little look, but not too in depth. Somebody basically said to me, like, 1 essence or maybe 2 champ essence is the equivalent of like $2.18, right? I know this is like a figure, like, whatever, right? There's a way to put a value on this essence. Now, is it on Sorare to do that? I don't know. But if I see, or if I know as a casual user that X essence is worth Y dollars, pounds, euros, or whatever, it does give me a little bit more hope. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, they're just pieces of, or I don't even know what you call them, right? They're just graphics on a screen. But ultimately, if you can somehow in your head put a hard number towards that, or equivalent that thing to a number, it does feel like an easier pill to swallow in some way, I think. I don't know whether it completely fixes everything, because it obviously doesn't. I do think there's something lost within, like, what essence is, if that makes sense. Like, we know it's a fractionalized card, but how much is that fractionalized card worth, at the end of the day?
So that makes me go back to the whole reason why I thought essence didn't make sense. That it's much easier for users, and I'm not saying that this is the answer, but I felt like what was the original word that ate shards? They were like pieces of cards. And I feel like in your head, you can picture like a puzzle, and you're like, all right, I have so many. Oh, I have, 8 pieces of this card and I need 16 or I need 80, whatever the number is. I feel like that is a much more understandable progress bar than like, oh, I have this essence and I get 20 essence, and that can be a tier 5. It could be a tier 0. And the total separation of whatever this progress bar system is, which is essence, from like the reality of a card, like, it's an extra step that we now have to explain. And that's basically what we said when it launched. It's like, we get the idea. The idea is really good, but it just takes explaining. The flip side is, would we have seen such a negative response from the community? And I'll say, I think we would. If we had like the very literal, like, this, you're going to win half of a tier 5 this week. And people are like, so we've gone from winning cards to winning a fifth of a card. Like, that's better. Like, I'm not sure what the path is to convincing people that this is, that giving reward boxes for 25% of users in Classic is better than rewarding the top 12%. And half of that 12% are getting tier 4s and 5s.
Yeah, it's a great point. Go on, Chris.
I also almost want to take it back a little bit further, in the sense of, I first discovered Sorare 4 years ago through work. Like I work at a sports media company, so I was actually introduced to Sorare from a business perspective, a tech startup perspective, and then eventually that piqued my interest, and I started playing when they still had commons. And I'm not a big baller player. Like for me, Essence is great because a lot of what I do is I reinvest what I win, and like the Essence is almost that. It's not a free to earn model, but like it is sort of like that to a degree. But I think one of the perceptions, and this is where we were talking about kind of the in season and the classic I was speaking about, Laird, was I think when people are talking about like classic is dead, there's the reward side of it, but there's also the idea that when you came into the platform 4 years ago, it was own your game. And it was this idea, one of the unique selling points was buy a card, own that card, use that card forever. And about 4 years ago is when I stopped playing FIFA Ultimate Team. And part of the reason I stopped playing Ultimate Team was you either A, had to grind an unreal amount of hours to build a good team, or you had to buy FIFA points. And then once that video game ended, you'd have to buy the next one and you'd have to do it all over again. And for me as a user coming in, that was such a unique proposition at the time to say, buy a Florian Wirtz once when he's 17 and use that card forever. Now, as a user, that made a ton of sense. As a Sorare, employee, that makes no sense because now this person's going to buy that one card and never buy another card again, sort of thing. So I can see it from both ends where my experience of when I came in 4 years ago, the perception of what Sorare is has changed over time. But there's still, I think, people that with that when they say classic is dead, it's that fear that if in season is going to be promoted so heavily, I need to constantly be turning over my gallery year after year. And I think, to me, I think that's sometimes where people are coming from when the classic is dead, is that they fear that every single year, like FIFA Ultimate Team came, you have to rebuild your team every single year. And whether that's true or not, I certainly don't think, because I primarily almost exclusively play in classic, and I'll try to win cards to go in to end season. But I do think there are people out there that have that fear or that perception of classic, and that's why it's dead.
So is it just like the introduction of something new that makes us think that classic is dead, even though it's very similar to what it was before?
New stuff always scares people, right? Like, I think it's always going to bother people regardless. And like, for example, gosh, I'm actually doing a terrible job of staying on track here. I hated the idea of fitness when it came out. The more I started to think about it, I was like, actually, I think fitness is a great idea. So yeah, I think whatever Sorare would have done, it would have always prevented some sort of, because the thing with all Sorare users is they almost all, and this isn't to be like a criticism or sound like better than anybody else, but like we almost always think about ourselves. So when Threshold initially went away, everyone saw was there goes my free money. But then when you think about it, the platform will be dead in 12 months if there are thresholds. Like, I think sometimes you've got to get over that initial shock of just because it's not best for you in the short term doesn't mean it's not best for everybody in the long run.
But I feel like we're still just kind of ignoring, like, I feel like, and I've talked about this with Sean before, PSU fans too, that like if something else is improved, that means whatever the something else is got worse, even if it's exactly the same. And I just feel like that's the situation that we're experiencing. And again, it must just be it's a perception thing. One of the things that you noted earlier that I think is really interesting is the fact that Sorare seemed to basically just ignore classic. That it's like all of their ideas are like, oh yeah, we have this great in-season comp. And in the situations where there is like a classic equivalent, they're like, oh yeah, and there's a classic one too. Like, don't worry, you'll have your scraps over there too. But it does feel like that they're just ignoring it. And maybe that's a pretty bad perception too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Peter's got a great question there. I think it says for Chris, but he's basically asking, are people like annoyed at that the same cards are always winning, or is it because of the rewards? I think it's a bit of both, but yeah, Chris, if I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, there's always argument of people's card value going down. Like everyone's always concerned about the value of their gallery. And I think they fear that if everything is put towards in season, whether that's the rewards, whether that's the communication, it's naturally going to drop the value of your classic cards. I think there's part of it is just like you've invested money into this. And it seems like if Sorare is not going to discuss classic, people are less likely to buy classic cards on the secondary market. So you're always going to be concerned about that side of things. In terms of the prizes, I don't know. I honestly think ultimately like it's always about money. And I think people's bigger issues, like they don't want to see their galleries die off. to me, I think that's probably where the perception of classic is dead is really what scares people the most, more than anything else. Because the idea is if I buy an in-season card, we talk about this all the time. When we get to like April, no one's buying in-season cards in Europe because there's only 2 game weeks left. We naturally always see that price drop off. And I think what people are concerned about is if I buy these in-season cards, if Classic is dead, I know that perceived utility that I used to think I was going to have with cards drops off. So I think it's more about people don't want to invest in things that they think are just going to drop off and have a very short shelf life.
Mm-hmm. I was just thinking then someone else mentioned it in the chat. I can't remember who it was. I'd have to scroll back up, but basically saying that like smaller people, smaller galleries are now, like we said about the fractionalized cards, they're winning less essence than bigger galleries, right? On average, that's just a fact. So their route to card is just a lot longer. You compare that to a month ago, two months ago, whenever the threshold went, and beyond that, when we've had the threshold over the last couple of years, as a smaller, limited user, smaller rare, whatever it is. The fact that you can churn $2, what's the low? Yeah, 2, 5, and 8, or whatever it was, or 2, whatever it was, something like that. There's a route to sort of success, which doesn't even matter what anyone else is doing on the whole platform. It's you versus the game. And I think to take someone that has that mindset and has the ability to churn $2, $5, $8 every weekend, sometimes twice a week, with a small-ish limited gallery, to now convince them that like everything's kind of fine and you're going to play classic now, but your route to something is these essence things. That to go from like that to that, those two realities are very different for the same manager. And I think in a short space of time, like for anyone, it doesn't matter small, big, or wet, gallery wise, that's a lot to kind of conceptualize and kind of realize. Do you get what I'm saying? Like that isn't. You feel like you're being screwed over. Let's just be real with it. But we know the Sorare wouldn't be around if that threshold was around. So that's the other part of it, right? There's a give and take with everything in life, and unfortunately, people don't want to they don't want to. That's the reality. The reality is this game wouldn't exist if that threshold was still around. Fact.
I think that's actually the whole point. Mike was saying, so is the underlying issue that beat the game is gone? It's not even the beat the game. It's the easier cash winning possibilities that's gone. Like, I don't think anyone actually cares that classic competitions are harder to win now, because like we're used to, like we were used to that anyway. It was just that we don't also have this cheap way to get cash.
It was always hard. Classics, all like that. Those competitions have always been hard. There's always been PSVs and Ajaxes and Bayerns, and that's always existed. But it's more prevalent now because nobody has that, like you said, Lid, but I have that threshold to fall back on. And if Classic does not work for me this weekend, I can fall back on my $2, my $5, my $8, my $60 in rare, whatever, in super rare. That fallback is the issue. Let's be honest. Like, it's not what's actually going on, because it's already been going on. We've always had good cards doing good, like making good scores. Like that has always been a thing since the game has been a thing. But obviously over the years, there's more cards and it does accumulate. I'm not saying it doesn't get worse. It obviously gets harder because there's just more cards, right? It's inflationary. Classic, that is. So I think the fallback, of not having the threshold, the easier cash, and not have to play against anyone else, like that's it. I think it is like I do disagree slightly with you. Like I do think it is beat the game plus the cash. Because the cash, the way to win the cash was you didn't have to play against anybody else, if that makes sense. It was just you, you versus you versus the game, whatever. I think it's a bit of both for me.
Yeah, I think a beat the game for boxes is like the only way that they can realistically do it. And everyone will be like, no, that's great. We love that. But nobody really loves that more than just winning cash from beating the game.
Of course not. Yeah.
Well, like I said, my ultimate concern was basically, and it's anecdotal, I don't have data sets to say this, but like I eventually stepped away from playing FIFA because like basically when I'm at work and the things we talk about, people pay one of two ways. They either pay with their cash or they pay with their time. Those are sort of the two ways you can monetize people. It eventually got to a point with FIFA Ultimate Team. I wasn't going to put any cash into it, but I also was no longer willing to put the time into it. My concern is if the perception gets to a certain point that if there's players like me who are primarily classic players trying to earn their way into end season, if they perceive that the challenge of getting to that point is too difficult, do they potentially say, I'm not willing to make that time investment anymore or that money investment. And then it's almost that same sort of path of what happens with Ultimate Team, where I'm just not willing to make it, because my concern is Sorare's not going to just exponentially grow. And therefore, like, that was the second part of my question to Laird, and my big long thread was when you start talking about retention versus new customer acquisition, and that's where that perception piece lies, because I do think Sorare probably does need to rely more heavily on retention than even most people do. I mean, retention's always cheaper than new acquisition, but I think for Sorare's business, given how niche it is, they need to be even, I would argue, more conscious of their perception to make sure they do retain those users. And let's be honest, like, you, all three of us, we probably have a bunch of classic cards. Now, I think we're all in agreement. You and I are probably stuck in for the long run regardless. But like, there probably are some people that do have large classic galleries that maybe at some point they do say, like, I just don't want to put in the time and the grind anymore. And I don't know if there's enough people on the other side to bring in, if there's enough of those people. And maybe, like I said in my Twitter thread, it could just be bad news travels better on social media algorithms than good news. And there actually aren't that many people, and it's just the loudest person's the easiest one to spot. But it does seem like there's enough people on Twitter, or like in the video Friday, that do seem to feel that there's that perception that a large part of their galleries, it's not worth the grind anymore.
And yet I feel like we're not seeing like a drastic reduction in entries. Like, maybe it's just too early for people to have given up.
Yeah.
Another thing that, like, if you want to go in more in depth on like people with like just big or just a lot of classic cards, I don't think it's not the quantity of cards is the issue. It's the quantity of not great cards is the issue.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it doesn't matter how many classic cards you've got. If you've got like elite cards, you're going to win in classic. Like, one of my guys in my member sections literally finished first 2 weekends in a row, Bundesliga 1, Challenger in the other. Like, if you've got a condensed classic gallery, you will win. Like, you know, if you play your cards right. Simple as. I'm not saying you'll win to come first, but you know what I mean. So it's more the fact that, like, and I've fallen victim to it, I think we all have in the past, where thresholds rewarded owning mediocre cards. That was Sorare's massive problem. Stars weren't stars, and we know they've come to the whole in season and fix it, whatever, right? But, you know, but we're all left with some of these mediocre cards, despite whatever scarcity that's in. So people are trying to win with these mediocre cards, and they're not going to, unfortunately. Like, that's just the reality of it. Like, you might now and again, you might get incredibly lucky when the PSV doesn't smash and you do, whatever. Definitely, you know, every dog has his day, but like, that's the issue. People are left with these like mediocre-ish cards and aren't willing to spend any more, which is on them. Like, fair enough if you don't want to. Like, I completely get that. But you can't then, I mean, you can complain because, you know, you're allowed to do whatever you want. But like, that's why people are complaining, because they're left with mediocre cards that had a route to success, i.e. easy cash. And now that route to success is these boxes that are even harder to obtain than the easy cash, which is just a bit like, how is that even possible? Because the reward now are worse. Let's just be honest. Winning essence is worse than winning cash. But yet it was so much easier to win the cash with the mediocre cards. There's just like so much going on there, and it's really hard to unpack, I think.
Let me ask a question. We talked about cap modes being gone. The disappointing bit was the beat the game element. How much of it is what you were saying, Harry, about having mediocre cards that compete? How much of it is just getting rid of capped competitions altogether? Say you remove the threshold, but you kept the competition type, where now all of a sudden, like, we'll keep 240, but we're just not going to pay thresholds. Now, I know there's some rejigging they would have to do with other prizes that they allocated in other competitions, but do you think there's a potential? It's not just the beat the game model and winning cash if you hit the threshold, as much as it's potentially, as you say, there's actually some lost utility for that player that's like a 40, you know, L15 that you could plug in when you'd already put in all your other stars. Like, do you think that's a possibility?
Yeah, I think there's room for a beat the game mode. I'm not saying that that's not going to take the place of the easy cash that we used to have. Nothing's ever going to replace that. We get it. But I do think, like, being brutally honest, if your card can't score 80 these days, it's useless right now in Classic. And we all just have to be in agreement on that. Maybe not the goalkeeper, but for the outfielders. Like in Challenger, whatever competition, if they can't score 80, unfortunately, it just ain't going to cut it, really, if we're being completely honest. We'll call it 75, whatever. So those cards that can't do that, you know, I think they need utility. Yeah, they definitely do. And does a cat mode-y type of beat the game situation work? 100%. Or like, you know, is there a need for it? Yes, 100%. I think otherwise, tier 3s, 4s, 5s. Unfortunately, are collection pieces at this point, of 4s and 5s for sure. But like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think there is a need for it. 1,000,000%. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'll just, to your point there, like scores you need, like I'm a limited player. I'm not a baller. I'm not in rare. And I was just looking at my Prem team in my classic, and Holland got 108. Palmer was my captain, 124. Vardy all got 78. Saka got a 70. Emiliano Martinez got a 54. I'm just getting a box, like 436 points. Like, I'm just not going to go down that route that some people have said that scoring over 400 points should get a prize. But like, I think it goes to your point. Like, I've got 6 total decisives between those players, and like nothing. Like,
what more can you do, really? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, you can't really do too much more.
Yeah, I think just the years of a beat the game mode put a number in our head that is really good. And like 400 is so much higher than we ever needed for threshold. And so like that feels like a really good level to get to if you want a reward. And obviously we know that like some weeks you don't even need 400 to win. Of course, those tend to get overlooked because they just do, I guess. This idea, I want to go back. Brad says, I'll say it again. And if I've learned, it's to not ignore comments multiple times, or else you end up on the show.
Get angry Twitter threads.
He said, lose divisions and make it 5 cap modes instead: 250, 275, 300, 325, and an unlimited cap. I feel like this has been brought up before. And I think the biggest hindrance is you basically need bad cards to play the first one. And each step you go up, you need better cards. And you don't have them because you only have the cards that fit in your previous low cap. And so there's so much work to do once you get promoted, and you don't want to get relegated either by using the same card. Like, you don't want to put a lineup that has a cap of 250 into a contest that is 275 because everyone else is running better cards. So I'm not sure like a progressive cap is the solution to divisions, but I mostly think that divisions are fine. So.
Yeah, I think I even tweeted you once, Laird. This one you did reply to. To be fair, you're actually very active on Twitter. I think I replied, my biggest gripe with divisions was I felt like 1 week was too short of a turnaround. And I think I've seen McBride tweet about it, like, it only takes 1 DNP and you can potentially get relegated, which feels harsh because it might take even longer to get back promoted. Like, I don't really have a big issue with divisions. My only thing has always been like, I don't know what the appropriate time frame is to do promotion relegation, but sometimes I feel like you can be pretty harshly punished for a DMP, but I've never quite gotten the hate on divisions myself personally.
Yeah, no, the pushback that I saw about having like monthly promotion and relegation is just that if you're in a lower division, you lose like half the season before you can get to D1. And that's if you get promoted every single time. And so like the benefit to me of the weekly promotion and relegation is simply like, if you do get relegated, you can get back up the next week. And so you don't have to wait like forever to do it. Mike says here, the disappointment for me now is that it's lost the quote, rewarding your football knowledge aspect. Being able to win prizes with players few other people knew about was brilliant. Why is that gone? Yeah. Like, don't you just care if they score well?
Well, I think he's probably referring to like FPL, whereby like the 3rd week of the season, everybody has the same exact roster. Now, obviously, Sorare being massively different and that it's international, there's more people to pull from. But I think what we've talked about is star players become more accessible because more of them have entered into the marketplace. The actual winners tend to look the same. Like, even when I was looking at my U23 team, there were some pretty consistent themes across it. And I think maybe that's where that question's coming from, is that because of how much availability there's for players. I used to always say like FPL is like the checkers version, where Sorare is chess in terms of how you go about scouting, picking your lineups, where if everyone's got access to Holland and Rodri and stuff like that, you do get more of that template roster. I think that's probably where that question's coming from.
I think it's more like, and like all-star and stuff. Like, you used to be able to pick 5 K-League boys and win Mbappe, right? That element is gone.
Just as Hoodwink checks in, says, I've won divisions with players from the team rock bottom of the K-League, so I think that still exists. I mean, you just have to pick your times.
Yeah, and you just can't win the champ card. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like, you just can't win a 40 grand Mbappe anymore. Well, not these 40 grand, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I like this one from Braden. People get mad when they don't win something with their better cards, and it's just because those cards are more popular, and therefore when those cards do well, it's harder for you to win. Shout out to everybody with PSV stacks who finished 100th this week.
But you show me, was it D1 Challenger Limited?
Yeah.
Was no PSV cards at all?
Correct. Yeah. So everybody was like, "Oh, PSV ruined Challenger this week," and I would argue that any Division 1 in Classic, and maybe you can make the argument it's Division 2, is in Limited Classic are the hardest, right? Like, it's harder to win Limited Division 1 than Rare Division 1 or Super Rare. So yeah, first place in Challenger Classic Limited Division 1 this game week, when everybody's like PSV ruined everything, was a Bruges defensive stack, Ryan Gauld, Evander, and Dusan Tadic. Second place also didn't have anybody from PSV.
Wow.
541 points, by the way. In case anybody's like, "Oh, the game's broken." That's good luck getting 541.
Yeah. Well, I saw a really interesting tweet that made me giggle. A guy complained about, I didn't get a prize. I think he was probably scored about in the 450s. And he was like, because there were 100 Barcelona stacks ahead of me. But then he looked at his lineup and it was an all Real Madrid stack. So it's sort of like, you can't sit there and complain about Barcelona stacks and you literally ran an all Real Madrid stack. It just wasn't your particular week, but it was really fun. But again, this is that perception reality thing I think we come back to, where it's sort of like, I scored 450, I've got this stack and I lost to a Barcelona stack. And it's your perception that like, oh, the game's broken. It's just like, no, someone did the exact same strategy you did. They just happened to outperform you on this different week, but like, you seem to think it's a good strategy and like someone just did it better on this particular week. And I thought it was really funny how they were calling out stacking, meanwhile running a stack themselves.
I think that's the biggest reason why I started playing under 23 years ago, because at the time it was like Ajax dominated the game in Challenger, Bayern dominated the game in Champ, and we didn't have any other comp. I don't think. Like, maybe we did. I don't know. But obviously, under 23 was his own little thing, and I just kind of just not figured out. I wasn't like fucking Einstein or anything, but like there was just no stacks there basically.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you had like a Timber, like there were still really good individual cards, but there was like no need to have 4 or 5 guys from the same team to win. Like, that wasn't the route to win. You could pick 5 guys from completely different teams. I'm not saying you can't do that now, but at the time, like, there was just the meta wasn't stacking under 23, and it never has been. That's why I've loved playing that competition, because it is a free for all, which is amazing, I think. Whereas some of these other competitions, I'm not saying it needs stacks, but it is like, there's no like lazy way to play under 23 is basically what I'm saying. Like, you do have to find 5 decent cards from all across the world, which is just, I think, amazing. Whereas in Challenger, if you want to be quote unquote lazy, it can still work though. You buy 5 PSV guys. I'm not saying that's a bad thing to do, but just realize, like you said, Chris, there's another 150, 200, 300 people doing the same thing, and they might have got in earlier than you and they have a better collection bonus. So good luck, basically.
Yeah. The other thing that I go back to with Classic, and I forget who it was who commented about it in the live chat on one of the streams. I think it was last week, but it was basically that they felt, and again, I don't think everybody feels this way, but how people feel about it matters, is that when they got in, they thought that own your game was like, yeah, I'll buy these cards, I get to use them forever and compete for great rewards. And there was almost not a guarantee, but effectively a guarantee that you would win. And I think Threshold probably played a part in that. But it feels like people who are really upset that Classic, and say that Classic competitions are dead, respond in a way of like, part of this deal for me was like, I would get to use these cards forever and win. And now I'm not winning. And so like Sorare are not holding up their end of the bargain, because it's harder to win. And all I win are some level ups from my 25% boxes. And do you guys feel like there is kind of an expectation of winning built in from Classic card purchasing, not now, but like previously?
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in on this because that's exactly how I joined the game. When I came in 4 years ago, I basically said the big USP for me was it's different from FIFA. I get to keep my cards year on year. I don't know if I ever had the expectation that like I would just automatically win. It was more as a player that was coming in with a limited budget. I kind of, I did the U23 strategy because, someone like, let's say Kyle Walker, for example, he's not going up in price. He is what he is. Whereas you could find a U23 who could potentially rise in price. Now, obviously, this is different to the days 4 years ago when those price rises were massive. But the point being was you could buy players at a lower price point and they would rise in value and utility. I don't think I ever had the perception that I was guaranteed to win because I did that. But I do think there's a degree of when I came into the game, I had a perception of how long I thought those cards would be good. Now, I suppose the difference between me is like I followed Sorare from a business perspective, and where I work, I follow a lot of startups and I see where a lot of startups fail and die. And I also see where a lot of businesses that are similar to Sorare, the adjustments that they've had to make in their business models in terms of how they monetize. And you sort of get to the point, I've accepted that Sorare's made the changes because that's what's best for the platform. And even though the own your game isn't the same as it used to, I can also appreciate I enjoy the platform. So I'm willing to accept the fact that the things that I bought into no longer align with that. But that's not necessarily a Sorare problem. That's just the economics of it. I think sometimes perhaps people they're not willing to let go of that because I do think there were some people like myself that bought it, but I've never played Sorare as an investment. It's always been I really like fantasy sports, and it just hit a tick for me. But I think some people who bought into it as an investment, that was their perception, and losing that didn't reflect with the reality of the situation. If I'm going to try to keep like bringing up like the topic that we've titled the session today.
Sorry, Nanzo commented here, and I have a follow up to him because this kind of goes on what you were just saying, Chris. He said, I don't see many people complaining about the expectation of winning as much as the drop in what you can win with classic cards. So to go back to like the utility thing, the utility obviously changes. Like just as Harry was saying, like Hoodwink can't use a stack from the last place team in Korea to win Mbappe. He can still use those cards. And that goes back to and anybody who's like complaining about utility doesn't want to hear like, you still have utility because it's just kind of because they don't see it that way. They see it as like, I bought these cards in order to win the best cards, and now I literally cannot do that. So is that the drop in what you can win? Like, is that what we're addressing? Or is it because like they're not really giving away fewer cards? We always knew that more users meant fewer people are going to win because there are not an infinite supply of card rewards they can give. So like, where is the drop in rewards that everybody sees other than threshold? And if it was threshold, like I get it.
Yeah. I think it's the drop is the fractionalization, right? That's what it is. It's the slowing down of rewards, if that makes sense. Like that's what Sorare have done. They've slowed down rewards, like you said. Like, there's no room to grow card rewards because we have fixed supplies. So that goes great because like, yeah, when I joined and probably when Chris joined, like it was the whole scarcity factor for me. It was like, that was a cool thing. I'm one of 100 people that own a Dennis Bouanga that plays for Saint Etienne. It's cool for me anyway. And then it's like, but that on the flip side of that, the negative is there's only going to be 100 of those or 40 of those given out every year. And then it gets to a point, doesn't it, over these years where it feels like we're drowning in that sense. That's the issue, right? The pendulum has swung a lot further than it kind of did, because way back in the day there was such fewer entries. It always felt like, oh, I've got a chance here. There's 20% of us are going to get a reward and a card reward at that. And now it's gone to 25%, even though that's a higher percentage. But it's not 25 are winning card rewards. It's potentially 25% could, because if everyone wins 20 essence,
yeah,
everyone does win a card. But that, unfortunately, that isn't the reality, because a lot of people will be winning level ups. And I think, going back to a point a few moments ago that we mentioned, like, is the reward box, or like, is the contents in the reward box itself the issue, or is it like just because we call it a reward box and it's not a card? Like, because you know what I mean, like, level ups, let's be honest, nobody wants a level up. So that feels like a kick in the balls when you've won a tier 4, tier 3 box. I don't know how it works, but whatever ones that have the level ups in, I think they even tier 5s have it, right, in classic, or is that false? I think they do, I don't know.
For how I win,
that's the
you're
thing.
100% level up. So.
But like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, that isn't a reward. As much as they want to paint that as a reward, winning a reward box and having a level up in there come out, like, does feel like a kick in the balls a lot of the time. But we understand they can't just give out tens of essence. Peter knows that. I just think there's two different arguments. There's like the contents of the reward box and what they've put in it. Can that change? Should that change? Or is it like the fact that it's just a reward box and not a card reward, if that makes sense?
That's
layers to it. Yeah.
I was just going to say there was an interesting comment that came in from Agent Cooper. I was going to go not necessarily to his question itself, but the comment he made about the rewards seemingly always seem to be the least exciting player in the pool. And I think this is a perception thing. The few times that, like, I've only been on the podium once in my 4 years, I've had some tier ones. My perception when I go in, just like self-prepare, I just always convince myself I'm going to get the worst player. It has happened before, and then sometimes that's not the case at all, and I've got one of the better ones, but I don't know if that's an actual perception thing as much as just a trying to look after your mental health and not lead to disappointment. But like anytime I look at the prize pool, I just automatically go to like the 3 worst players and just assume that's the player I'm going to be drawing.
Yeah. So for those, Cooper said, how many Mbappes have been rewarded? My other issue is that even if the miracle happens and you win a competition, the reward always seems to be the least exciting player in the pool. Like that's happened for years. Mm-hmm. Like somebody can't win Mbappe every single week. And there are weeks, where like the top reward is not that exciting. And when it happens to you, like it's a real like kick in the balls. It's exactly how it feels. Nep said, in my opinion, the respective value of what you need to spend in Classic to win top rewards is no different to what it's been historically. I'm guessing that's like how much you have to spend versus the value of the rewards, not that. But he said people are seemingly unhappy they can't win a tier 5 DNP with 280 points. Like that's kind of part of what gets me. And that's why I asked you, Harry, about that earlier, that the number of times that people are really excited to win a tier 4 or tier 5, like the card pops up and they're like excited, is so low. And the times that it's not low, it's because you were like, I have a collection. Here's a free piece. Like, that's great. Like those cards, we don't play to win those cards. And so like replacing that with Essence, I just don't feel like changes anything that much, other than the fact that now you have a 0.1% chance to win that star.
Yeah, but the overall scores required to even get into whatever tier now, it is just a lot higher. I know we've got 50% bonus and stuff, and it might be that doesn't help, as far as like how much the scores look like, and raw score wise, it could be a different story a lot of the time. But that's what I see on Twitter all the time. It's like, I scored X, I deserve, like, why aren't I winning Y? Like that is a lot of the time what I'm seeing. I'm not saying it's wrong. Like I completely see everyone's sort of complaints and stuff. Like I get it. Like these scores do look crazy, but I don't think the 50% bonus thing helps.
Yeah.
Not that that's the only reason, but it just doesn't help.
Perception wise, it does not.
No.
Yeah. I would just go back to you said, Laird. I agree. I don't think anyone's ever been excited about a tier 5 and tier 4, but to your point, that's where Essence becomes the positive, because I sort of see it as like, I'd rather have the control to collect and save up to the tier 1, save it all the way to the max, and actually win something I would want, as opposed to winning 50 tier 5s that I will never use, can probably never sell off even for pennies. But that's a perception thing, is like maybe people don't find us. But I know for me, I've always played the long game of Sorare because I just don't have the budgets to do otherwise. Like I'd rather win Essence 50 times for the chance to pull something from a much limited, safer pool than keep winning all those tier 5s, tier 4s that just sit in my gallery useless.
This line is coming from DN. Boxes are rewards, but level ups aren't rewards. It's such a great line.
It's so accurate.
Yeah. Nep said base scores aren't really higher. XP is better. Collection and 50% bonus. That's your extra points. Like I truly believe that the game is not exponentially harder just because the scores are higher.
Interesting. Someone just asked, I actually don't know the answer to this question. Laney795, does Essence run out at the end of the year? I wasn't aware that it had a expiration date.
I don't think it ever runs out. It ever expires.
Yeah. I hope not.
I think what PowerPress has said there is an interesting one, I think. Like the price point of a lot of these, quote unquote stars now are just lower. More people have access to them, meaning that before, if you bought a Gil, like you kind of expected to win whatever, right? Now, like everyone buys a Gil, and now everyone expected to win, but there's not enough prizes to go around for everyone to win, if that makes sense, right? So like everyone has this, not the same gallery, but almost everyone now has access to these cards, whatever scarcity that is. And that does make things trickier, because there was a price differentiator, wasn't there, on the market, where like I remember years ago, like I had it, for me, at one point playing under 23, it was either I could own Pedri or Turkey. Like I couldn't have both. I did not have the bank balance to buy both. It was one or the other. And now these days, you can kind of have
got 12
2 times 10. You have 12 of them. So it's like, and that's the issue again then, because like, yeah, you're still going to reap not the rewards, but you're still going to reap the good scores from them. But those good scores nowadays are equal to other people's good scores, because they have Cherokees themselves, and they have Pedris,
Well, I mean, Cherokee just gets us 0. So,
Well,
but I think, that was part of my point on Friday. Like that was always going to happen, regardless of card values.
Mm-hmm.
There were going to be more cards every year that people were going to buy. And like Nanzo is not going to go out and buy 12 Carlos Heel cards, rares. So it's like other people are going to go out, and then they are going to have lineups that are better. Like obviously a drastic fall in prices has also has probably played a bigger part. Mm-hmm. Like it sped up the process, but just the fact that there were more out there was going to cause that to happen anyway. I also want to, Tom Olivier said today's tier 1s are often yesterday's tier 5s. This is like completely false. Like most tier 5s never even hit tier 4. Some do, but most do not.
There used to be goalies. That was probably the only one that had like a route to being a tier 2, tier 1 or whatever.
Absolutely.
Because they just play football now, and they just
right. Just because they play.
Yeah.
Nep said, for me, people's biggest hang up rightfully is the fact that bad classic cards have 0 value.
Exactly.
So you can't even really sell them to restart your gallery, invest more, or suffer with your crap. And that's really bad for morale for people who have spent so much time and money on the platform.
And those used to win you easy thresholds. That is like somebody mentioned earlier, like they didn't get my point or whatever. Like nobody's forcing you to play with those mediocre cards or, use them, whatever. Like, but the issue is you can't, like what Nep's saying, you can't resell them for anything to where like that can help you jump up to the next level without you putting money in. If you don't want to do that, then that's, it's on you, but ultimately it's also, fine to not do that.
Mm-hmm. Simon said the shit cards are useless now. That's the crux of the problem.
Mm-hmm. So that's where cat modes come in. Like what Chris said, like there is a need for a beat the game somewhere along, I know we have it in these special weeklies now and again, but a permanent or I don't mind the whole, like one of the lower divisions, i.e. probably Division 5, because it's the lowest, like does have a cap or something along those lines to where there is a little bit more thought that needs to go into it. Then that goes against like Brad mentioned, like having a cap in everyone, and the last one, tier 1, Div 1 not having a cap. I think that's a bit too restrictive. I think maybe like 4 and 5 at limited, 4 in rare has some sort of cap to where like you can't just smash in, your 5 guys, and because that then goes against like, the whole, everyone's still playing their cards down, because people are still doing that. They're still playing their good cards in lower divisions. And I know some people have just been placed there because if I go and buy Premier League in season limiteds now, I have to play in Division 5. Like I do get that. It's not on the user. So I've done that. But if there is a cap on that lowest division, I'm not saying it drastically changes anything, because it doesn't. But like, I think it just does give value to some of those lower Premier League cards or lower whatever league you're playing it in region. I think it helps something. Does it move the needle enough? No, obviously. Like that's not the case. But there's definitely something there, 100%.
I feel like it's okay for bad cards to not have like important utility.
Not important, but some. I feel like, Neps, like they have no utility. If a card can't score a 70, 80, I think they're toast right now.
But that's not even the mark. It's like this guy averages 40. Like, why do we need it? Why do we need those cards to have utility every single game week?
So
Cool.
I'm gonna take us in a slightly different direction. I'm just gonna keep bouncing through my thread of things I mentioned to you, Laird. One of the things I talked about was ARPU, or average revenue per user, and what I mean by that is, like in my industry, we look at things like Netflix and Amazon, and you see them diversifying their monetization streams, because at some point, even businesses as big as them realize at some point you can't acquire any more new consumers. So the only way you can make money once you've sort of saturated your market is then to drive up the average amount of revenue per user, which from a Sorare perspective, I made the comment earlier, I don't think they're going to exponentially grow. So the only way for the business to continue to grow is essentially drive up the average revenue for each one of us as users. And I think in most cases, like, people are willing to spend money if they feel like what they're getting back matches what they're putting into it. And I think if the rewards continue to drop, but the perception is the only way I can play the game to make my money back is through in season, it creates this perception that in order for the platform to continue to exist, the platform continue to ask more and more of me to keep the platform going. And I think it's just something, like I said, because I see it in other industries and other things where like they're trying to drive up the average revenue per new user. If the perception is Sorare is simply just trying to extract more and more money out of me, but they're not actually offering me more value for what I put in, that again creates that negative perception, particularly around, Classic, where I'm not getting the same value out of Classic. And I think that's just, it's another one of those, as it goes over year, like it can change that perception that Sorare is trying to milk me for more and more money without actually giving me any more for that investment that I'm putting in. I know I just said a lot of things there, but like it's an extension of the kind of the thread that I kind of threw out there.
Do you think that changes when they've run out of cards to sell? Like, does the perception of Classic change when that becomes kind of the primary way for new season cards to be distributed? And we actually move into this kind of different phase of Sorare where the first, let's even call it the first half of the season is in season, and that you win, any cards you win there, like they'll have some value, but you're competing against Sorare to sell them. But the second half of the season, like Classic competitions are the only place that you can get new season cards. Obviously the secondary market, but like you win them and then you can sell them into a secondary market that is not competing with the primary market as much. Now, I actually think that we're so far away from that on the limited side because there are just so many cards they can sell and not enough users. But from the rare perspective, I wonder if we start to see that change or not.
What's the most cards I've ever sold in limited? Because surely they've never come close to selling all 1,000. I know I'm asking that question.
700.
Yeah.
I don't know. Where was the? Sorry, there was a comment and now I've lost it. I don't know. Sorry. Deanne said, "Are most OG users putting money in? It looks like those people that pissed and try to milk Sorare while Sorare tries to milk more people." I mean, I've deposited within the last few months.
I've put a low, like the last year, I've never deposited more than, maybe not in value, but like definitely quantity wise, like I'm always buying cards, whether that's secondary or auction, just because like I want to just get better. Like, there's room for my mediocre cards to, they need some good companions.
Sorry, I was saying the Parapress was asking if they change the quantity of cards in each scarcity. Does limited move to 500 in the future if their business model doesn't work? I don't think that they will do that. They'd rather just sell 500. Like, meaning like just stop at 500 instead of actually changing the scarcity.
If you wouldn't mind pulling up the comment, 556 from Laney about Serie A. This was one of the other things I mentioned in my thread where I said one of my concerns was Sorare at the moment from a monetization perspective only makes money by selling cards, primarily in-season cards, a little bit from the secondary side. One of the things that exists in my world that I talk quite a bit about that Laney mentioned is Serie A and League One, for example, didn't sell their rights in the UK and they're now going direct to consumer. And what I would love to see from Sorare, and I know it sounds really easy to do, I don't know what the rev share model would look like for Sorare, but I don't know. Do you guys use OneFootball as a platform?
I used to, and then they got rid of the Danish Superliga.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I love about OneFootball is it is an all-around sports platform, but it does stream games and it offers pay-per-view, particularly for lower-tier sports in non-premium markets. So, for example, Serie A in the UK or things like that. And one of the things I would find interesting, I think Sorare needs to stay in its lane and understand that Sorare is not a streaming platform. but I would love to see potential media partnerships with someone like a OneFootball, because for example, OneFootball is giving away 1 month passes to Apple's MLS season pass. Can Sorare potentially find someone like a OneFootball where it's like the amount of football I watch now of the most random teams ever, because I have a Sorare card compared to 4 years ago, it has grown exponentially. It'd be really cool if it was like Rivals and it was some low tiered sport being like, hey, click through to watch the game on OneFootball for pay-per-view. Like, I know that's not a simple relationship or transaction, but I would be really interested to see if Sorare could do something with someone like a OneFootball for a media perspective, because I feel like Sorare doesn't do any media themselves. They rely on people like you two, or they rely on people like John Nellis. Like, I just think there's something missing there. And like I said, it wouldn't be a huge revenue stream. Like, it would be minuscule per se, but like, I do get a little nervous sometimes that Sorare really only makes money in one way.
I had this conversation with Black yesterday, whenever it was, and he is in the boat that Sorare, like, branching out with new revenue streams is not worth it, and that let me see if I can pull up his example. One of them was like Hershey sells candy,
Yeah,
and like that's what they do, and they do it really well. And I guess that's giving Sorare a lot of credit, saying that they do this really well. But what was it? Top sells cards, Snickers sells candy, which is funny that he called it Snickers because some company makes Snickers. But anyway, and so it's not like I struggle thinking that a new revenue stream solves everything, and at the same time maybe takes resources away from what they should be focusing on.
Yeah, agreed. I don't think that whatever revenue stream is going to be massive, but at the same time, McDonald's started selling cheeseburgers, and then they started selling chicken nuggets, and then they started selling breakfast. Like, I think something like a media partnership with someone like a OneFootball, as an example, it's not like it's football and football. It's not necessarily two different things. And like I said, I don't know what the answers on that would be. Like, that would be more complicated, and it could very well be it's not worth the amount of effort that it goes in. I just think Sorare, I don't think, do a lot of media content. I mean, other than like the Zidane experience or when they had the game at Liverpool, there's not really a lot of content. Everything is almost solely reliant on third parties on YouTube or whatever social media channels that they're using. I don't know. It's just something I would be a little interested in seeing if they branched out a little bit more. But I totally also get the point. They're not operating with big budgets, and anything they do decide to put resource in, like, they do have to be careful about like what the investment or the return on that investment is going to be.
I'm pretty sure Nicholas has said before, like, I mean, he said a lot of things, but you know, they want to be like, you know, an entertainment giant type of thing.
Yeah.
So that stuck out to me a little bit in that, and I think that, you know, what you said there, Chris, has been mentioned before over the years. But yeah, like the fact that like the JPL, the Jupiler League, like imagine having, you know, a discounted, I know it's on one, or used to be on OneFootball or whatever. Imagine having like a discounted entry point to watch those games through Sorare, and Sorare take the Midland fee type of thing. Like little things like that. There's definitely, again, what Les said, it's probably not going to move the needle too much, but it enhances your Sorare, experience, and they're making a bit of money from it. Like I don't really see like, again, these are contracts and rights and all that jargon, but like, I don't see too many downsides really on the surface of things. It obviously gets a bit more complex, but like that's a good thing for users to be able to watch their players. It doesn't have to be on the website of Sorare, but like at least like a link or something that takes them that way. I think that'd be amazing.
It could be something they're working on. We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Kev said, I think they might either increase the secondary market fee or introduce more microtransactions as they tried with fitness to fuel more rewards in Classic. I don't think that's ever happening. Like, I really don't see them moving in a direction where they make more money and pay cash to Classic competitions.
Maybe just distribute the cash they already pay in different ways. Like there was, I think just Mike, he's not in the chat, but he finished fourth in like a La Liga super rare competition. He was like two or 3 points off the third place, which gets you a cash and a card. He's winning a box, but like the top prize was like £900, and then it was like 400 and 300 or whatever. Like shave off the 300 from the top, they win 600, and then from 4th to 10th, win 50 quid each plus a box. Like, is that hard to do? Little things like that. You're not changing any of the prizes, as in like you're not adding any cash to it. You're just distributing it differently, and 10 people are happy, not 3. Little things like that. Again, I'm not saying that changes everything, but I just do think the way they distribute things, like the £7,000. I know we've talked about jackpots, so like this is going against what people have said in the community and everyone. Like there needs to be a jackpot element. I get it, but do we need to win $7,000 for the Champions League? Like, can't that be 6 and 1,000 goes down even lower? Like, I don't know. I just think they miss the mark sometimes on, where the cash and how the cash is distributed like more evenly.
I want to ask you guys a question because it came up, that microtransactions question, talking about fitness and just getting your guys's, because there's probably been a time you guys have talked about, and I may have missed the pod, but originally when they came out the fitness, I immediately like vomited in my mouth because it just made me think of FIFA Ultimate Team, and I always hated fitness being a part of the game. But the more I thought about it, like people have talked about like burn mechanisms, like needing to be something for Sorare. I've come to the belief that like the burn mechanisms actually the fitness is the perfect burn mechanism, in the sense of every week in a row you play your Rodri card, he loses some of his bonus percentage as if he were to be getting fatigued from being used all the time. And in order to rebuild up the bonus, you'd have to put him in a training or put him in the fitness program. And then in that case, all of a sudden, the amount of Rodris that are being played in Classic every week is limited because people want to recharge the bonus or whatever sort of detriment you want to make to playing the same card over and over and over. Once I started to wrap my head around, I actually thought that was a decent burn mechanism that didn't prevent you from permanently losing your card, but also organically filtered out and reduced the number of those star cards every single week that you had a reason to potentially not play that card because you wanted to build them back up. I'm just curious to know what your guys' thought was on fitness and why the perception of that was so negative. Like I said, I know why it was, because originally I hated the idea, but the more I've thought about it, I actually think the reality of it's a lot different than my initial perception of it was.
I remember my initial negativity was that they had announced it soon after they had announced the collection game. And it felt very strange that you were like, I specifically remember it was like your top collection score got you 5% more on your cards. And in fitness, it was 10%. And it was like, so you're telling me that fitness is like twice as important as collections, one of which I have to pay a lot for depending on scarcities to like get to 5%. And the other one, like as we've kind of thought about it more over the last year or whatever, when we basically got them to shut it down, I think the like 10% always felt really drastic, but I also think that it has to be drastic in order for people to really consider not playing their best cards. Like the whole point was just like you said, Chris, the idea was to reduce the number of like star cards that people were having to compete against. And so, scores are lower now. Everything's great. We can win with 375. And it just felt so drastic to get like such a bonus on those star cards. Whereas now it kind of feels like you have to, like, I feel like you have to do something drastic for people to not play them. But I also feel like it moves into the same idea of like locking cards or burning. Like Sorare doesn't want to have a game mechanic where you want to buy the stars and then not be able to play them. Like that kind of feels like it goes against it would be what we all complain about for you. Our cards have no utility anymore. We can't win anything. And now you're going to say I can't even use my Rodri? Like I don't see the community perceiving that well.
And they did.
I think it's the right idea. Agent Cooper's bringing up SO11. I think the downsides are way higher than the ups.
Yeah, I mean, from just not having the budget to field. Like I feel good about some of my SO5 teams. I would struggle to feel I had a degree of, because I think one thing I've learned about Sorare is like you need more than one bite of the apple to get it. Like you need to have depth because all it takes is a single injury, or hell, look at Declan Rice probably picking up the worst red card in the history. He's not going to play the next 3 games. Like if Declan is someone you've built your Arsenal stack around, like that's punished even more harshly with SO11. And I think, for me, my perception is like, I would struggle to compete, and like the depth it's taken me to build up to feel comfortable to manage midweek games and manage injuries, or when the Austrian league takes their like ridiculously long winter break, that you need a degree of depth to actually be successful week on week in Sorare. And I just think SO11 would just, in my perception, it would stretch me too far.
I think people underestimate how much of an advantage it is to bigger galleries to increase like the number of cards you need in a lineup. Like 11 is, we'd never win. Sean would win every week. Nanzo wins like everything. It's like, it's so much easier to overcome 5 scores than 11 scores.
100%.
Yeah. Peter also points out SO11 makes it harder for new users to join. I think this was the right point from when fitness was introduced and people said this, like, why should you get punished for owning players who never get rested? Like, that's part of why certain cards have the value that they do, because you know this guy is going to always play.
Kimmich, Rodri.
Right. Sorry, I'm catching up on the chat. Pascal said SO11 for one competition. Don't need to make it the norm. Like, I still think like I would be shocked if within the next year we didn't have like an SO7 or 11 special. The problem will be that most of the big galleries won't prioritize it. And so everyone will be like, see, it's not that bad. And then it's actually just because people were ignoring it.
Well, I think even for me on the flip side, if I were to commit to an SO11, that's less lineups I can run across all of them. And my goal is to run as many lineups in a week, because like you can't win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket. The more tickets you buy, the better chance you have. Like if I do SO11, it's just less competitions I can enter. And if we're already complaining about how difficult it is to win, let alone the fact SO11 will be more difficult to win, it's just less entries I have to pull my ticket out of the raffle.
Dean said SO11 is great because instead of getting 1 DNP, you're getting 4.
Yeah.
I still think one thing we haven't really mentioned on this actual stream, but I'm sure it's been mentioned in the chat, is like cosmetics. Like that has to be one of the easiest microtransactions.
So easy.
The Sorare can come up with, right? Like you said, Laird, a case for your card. It doesn't have to even be anything attached to the card itself. It can be like an external thing, which doesn't affect, all the, the data, whatever you want to call it, in the blockchain. And I don't know. There's so many things that they could come up with, right, that people would just love. Like I'd love to be able to see how many times my Florentino Luis has won a reward or won a division or whatever. Like just little nostalgic like touches like that. Like they're just easy wins, like really easy. I don't know how much manpower has to go in behind the scenes designer wise. I'm sure there's a lot. Like I'm not downplaying that, but I'm just surely that's an easy win. Like I'm all for things that like I don't mind paying for things that like don't affect gameplay. I really think that's the sweet spot, because nobody can moan about his Rodri's now better than mine. It might look different, but it means the exact same thing, and that's the bottom line. It might look different, but that's the extent we're going with. With that, or the case looks different.
I know that everybody got reward boxes for doing it, but the degen buying of champ cards this weekend with the decisive special just cemented to me that people are willing to just throw money away on this platform.
To the
like I appreciate the reward boxes there, but like I think cosmetics are just easy.
So right, yeah, but then that goes against what we're all saying about like reward boxes aren't like a reward, because people are spending stupid amounts on these limited cards compared to what they usually were before the special, over this weekend with the winning a reward box if your card gets a decisive. Like we see some crazy price hikes. Like I've seen some cards going for like $30 and stuff that were like not $30 before that. Yeah, like crazy price, like 4, 5, 6 X's. I'm sure of it. So it's like I mean, genius, fair play for Sorare to come. Like, I will give Sorare one like a credit with that, because like they always come up with something that like the community never comes up with. That's the reason why they're working there. And I get it, but like they always do just somehow come up with some sort of promotion that's like so left field, but just it works, man. Like I can't really knock it.
Did you buy any?
No, I don't play limited. My road to glory is poor, lad. Come on, we don't have funds like this to throw about.
Can't be buying champ cards there.
No.
Somebody brought up, where is it? Hadbog said that they should sell merch.
Just not
I don't think
scalable, though.
that's there. There really aren't enough people who want to wear a Sorare shirt, even though I'm literally wearing one right now.
I'd really want one. I'd love one.
You don't have one?
No, I don't have any. I have two.
You have a hat, don't you?
Yeah, I have hats, but I don't have a shirt or a hoodie. Come on.
I don't have a hoodie.
Yeah, that one's.
I visited. This is way off topic. I visited the Sorare office in New York once, and they, like 20 people were wearing Sorare hoodies, but they said one of one unique, and I was like, "You're all wearing the same sweatshirt that says unique." Like something's not right here. Anyway. Kev said exactly what Harry said on cosmetics and microtransactions. If they do rebalance rewards to make Classic more attractive, I assume that just means not as top heavy for the cash, because I'm not sure how else they rebalance. Better believe we'll pay for that one way or another. Hoodwink one Sorare socks in a box. Scosmo. Sorare is not an apparel company. That totally agree. And Andy said, Harry, one of the biggest streamers Sorare has, and the fact they haven't decked him out with merch is wild.
But isn't that because they give all the influencers really good prizes and boxes?
It's a give and take.
I haven't been at that. That's why I have the shirt, because I haven't won anything good out of my box.
That's the perception reality, right? Perception is if you're an influencer, you get big rewards. That's reality, right?
That's a good point. That's a good point.
No comment.
They aren't going to make money from a clothing line. Would people even wear it? Like, who would wear a Sorare shirt? Maybe just not outside. Nanzo said, why do so many Sorare shows descend into Sorare money-making brainstorming sessions? It's super weird. So Nanzo, the reason why is because people are convinced that if Sorare make more money, they'll increase rewards and then we'll make more money.
I'll be honest, like it's not even about that for me, because like I said, I've always played Sorare because I enjoyed the game. For me, like the reason I brought up the questions that I did to you, Laird, was like, I remember when like this space all really started blowing up like at the end of 2020. And for me, like working in sports, like it's kind of my job to follow the industry. And at the time, like that was when like NBA Top Shots was like the thing. Everybody was buying them for absolutely crazy dollars. And even outside of that, you think like Bored Ape Yacht Club, like the things that people were spending on this. And the reason I bring it up is like, I would genuinely be upset like if Sorare was gone. Like I enjoy it as a challenge for me. I enjoy that challenge. I enjoy finding new players I never heard about. And just where I work, I see a lot of companies that have really great ideas that don't exist or anymore, and they fall off. And I think the reason at least the reason I'm having this conversation is because like, not because I believe I'm going to get rich off Sorare, like that ship is long sailed and gone, but like I really like the product, and I'm just concerned that I've seen so many other businesses in this space that have failed. Like you're almost sort of trying to avoid that. So that's how it is for me. It's not because I think my gallery is all of a sudden going to rebound to what it was 3 years ago, but I just don't want the platform to fail. And there's so many businesses in this space. Like it's tough. It's just really difficult. Like I think the way we talk about it is like, you're going to have to buy your, like if you're in the UK, you've got to spend your subscription for Sky Sports. Then you got to get for TNT. Then you got to get Amazon Prime. Like you got to spend a lot of money on things. Are you going to have money left over for Sorare? Like, or like I could just go to TikTok, or I could go to the pub and I could spend my time. Like you're either spending your money or you're spending your time. And it's never been more competitive to be like in the sports media space than it is today, because there's simply so many options. So sorry, I went on a bit of a soliloquy there, but like my thing is like, I'm bringing it up because like I don't want Sorare to fail, and it's a really difficult space to be in.
It's completely uncharted. That's all. And Nanzo, if you think that's the most bizarre thing we've had on this channel, then you need to watch a little more often. Chris, is there anything that we didn't touch on the from Twitter?
No, we pretty much touched on it all. I talked about the perception of it becoming like Foot or FIFA Ultimate Team, where it becomes repetitive and that becomes a grind people aren't willing to climb. I guess maybe we didn't spend a ton of time talking about the perception of like acquiring new customers versus retaining. We talked about it a little bit, where like I think it's whenever you introduce something new, the old people aren't going to like it, but it's like, how do you find that balance of being able to retain versus also being able to acquire new customers? That's always going to be a server thing. And then we talked about the different monetization models very briefly. So I think we talked about most of the things. And I'll be honest with you, Laird, like I said, I appreciate you bringing me on, because like for me, like I just was tired of trying to exchange thoughts in 280 characters. It's so difficult to do. So yeah, like I just think it's interesting, because I think there's the objective side of things where like I agree with almost everything you say, Laird, from a business perspective, but some people's perspective, they don't care. You could tell them the sky's red and like, that they'll believe it. And, it's sometimes you need to have a little, I don't want to say sympathy, but like Sorare in particular have to still reach out to the middle of those people. They can't just say, get with the times or ignore it. Like, even if they don't objectively change rewards, just talk about it a little bit more, do something just to make people feel like, most people just want to feel a little love, want a little TLC, just make them feel a little special. You don't have to go over the top, but so yeah, like overall, I just appreciate you bringing me on.
Of course. The Foot thing kind of made me go back to a thought that I had, and maybe like Nep is the person I should ask about this. But the weird thing with me of people who played FIFA Ultimate Team, and they're like, Sorare is so much better, and then Sorare kind of introduced something that's like it's similar to what happens in Ultimate Team, and everyone's like, that's a really bad idea. And EA makes like billions of dollars a year. Like I really struggle. Like I understand why people stop playing and like start playing Sorare, but looking at EA and being like, we should definitely not do anything they're doing because we don't want to make billions of dollars. Like, I'm not saying that copying them is like what they should do, but it always felt weird to me that people were like, don't do that, because like that's what they do in FIFA, now EAFC, and it's like, that's not a terrible model. Like it feels pretty successful to me.
So in advance of this podcast, I wanted to try to see if I could find any stats, and I was hoping I'd find something that said, with the move to EAFC, that all of a sudden the game sales would have dropped. And it was like, yeah, they sold less copies, but they made more microtransactions, so they still made a I was praying to, back up because this is that whole perception versus reality thing. I was hoping I was going to be able to find some facts to say that my perception that Foot was being destroyed by all of these things, actually, no, it's doing fine. And like, that's, I guess, the whole point of this like topic is like perception versus reality. My perception was, I don't enjoy this experience, but like the reality is I was in the minority, and like they're clearly still doing fine.
Similar with Sorare, like they've sold, I can't remember what the figure was, right? But we know that they've sold like a very good amount of cards since, the pre-launch and whatever, and they've kind of like covered a good chunk of what they plan to reward and stuff. So yeah.
Right. Like everyone, I don't want to buy in-season cards. And then this weekend they're like, we have this special. And everyone's, oh yeah, I'll buy those. And just like, yeah. And Toby said EA makes a worse game every year, yet they make more money every year. It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, we'd love to get to that point.
Yeah,
that's why we want to be
so they can get rich. Yeah.
But the ironic thing is, the game's way better now. Like this game in a lot of ways. So it's just interesting, really interesting.
Yeah. We'll see. Anyway, Chris, thank you very much for coming on. Appreciate that and all the effort that you put into summarizing everything on Twitter. And I shared Chris's tweet in the live chat earlier, but let me drop it in there again in case anybody wants to see what he was talking about. So yeah, thank you to everybody for coming. If you could please like, subscribe, all that good stuff. Shout out to Quinny. Thank you to everybody in the live chat participating today and anybody catching up. Hope you enjoyed it. Yeah. So guys, thank you very much, and good luck out there.